Hello. Seems funny to use a microphone in this intimate setting, but I'll do so to make sure you can all hear me. Welcome to Houghton Library. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. My name is Anne-Marie Eze, and I'm Head of Collections and Programs here at the library. And if you haven't been to the library before, Houghton is Harvard's home to rare books, archives, performing arts and literature, and so much more. And we're really delighted to have a very active public programs of free events and lectures such as these. And this is really exciting because this is one of the first lectures that we're holding in person, coming out through the pandemic. So the lecture this evening is part of a series called the George Parker Winship Lectures. We hold it twice a year, and this is the Spring 2022 lecture. And the George Parker Winship series was founded in 1968, so the library has held over 100 lectures since then. And they're held in honour of George Parker Winship, who was a librarian at the university and also a scholar in the field of bibliography. And he made many contributions to the field, but one of his biggest contributions was kind of really encouraging book collecting and a love of books at the university. And so since the 1968, the series has held lectures to do on book collecting, on librarianship, on culture generally. And we're delighted this evening to hold, I think, probably one of our first lectures on collecting in the area of Southeast Asia. So I'm going to hand over the microphone to a dear colleague of mine, Susan Gilman, who's the librarian of Tozer Library here at Harvard, which is a library for archaeology and anthropology. And my colleague Susan is going to introduce our speaker for this evening. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. It's really wonderful to be here in person again. I have the pleasure of introducing Binalakshmi Nepram, or as we call her, Bina. Bina is a scholar and activist who is passionate about issues surrounding indigeneity, gender rights, and disarmament, with much of her work focused on Manipur, Northeast India, and South Asia. Bina is the founder of 3 organizations: the Manipur Women Gun Survivors Network, the Control Arms Foundation of India, the Global Alliance of Indigenous Peoples, Gender Justice and Peace, and Action on Armed Violence of London named her one of the 100 most influential people in the world working in armed violence reduction in 2013. She is the recipient of various awards, such as the CNN IBN Real Heroes Award in 2011 and the Anna Politkovskaya Award, did I get that right, in 2018. Bina also engages in this work on a global scale through her engagement with the United Nations and authoring and editing numerous books. Her most recent work was titled Deepening Democracy, Diversity, and Women's Rights in India. Bina has brought her incredible knowledge and experience to different fellowships at institutions such as Columbia University, Connecticut College, the National Endowment for Democracy, and now Harvard University. During her time here at Harvard, Bina helped organize the Indigenous Peoples Convening on Health Impact of Conflict, Militarization, Arms, and Narco-Trafficking. She engaged in work with the Harvard Kennedy School's Carr Center for Human Rights Policy, and she also partnered with Houghton, Widener, and Tozer Libraries, which is some of the work she'll share with you today. On a personal note, it's been a real joy getting to know and work with Bina. Her warmth, passion, and resilience are a real inspiration, and I'm really extremely grateful for our collaboration. So on that note, I'm going to hand things over to Bina. Yes, is that right? This is next? Okay. I want to make sure I get that order right. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anne-Marie, and thank you, Susan, for the warm welcome and the introduction. I pay my obeisance to each one of you present in the room with an indigenous saying from Manipur, Mayam Butaramna Okchuri. I am so grateful to be here today here for the Spring George Parker Winship Lecture. So what I will do is, I am an anti-academic. I cannot read from text. So what I will do is I will speak from my heart and my mind. So I will be bringing to you the work that we have been doing on documenting indigenous nations, war, and peace. Because we are at the moment in history where we are seeing a lot of violence in Ukraine and other parts of the world, and we are absolutely saddened by the kind of violence. And I hope that even though this lecture focuses on Manipur and northeast of India, it is a story which touches the lives of almost every part of the world, and I will demonstrate through that. This is an image from Manipur, Khamba Thoibi Jagoi, which is our folk dance from that culture performed in Moirang, originated in that particular place. All right, so it's not going. The next slide. So it's stuck. Okay, it's unstuck again. So okay. Yes. It's been 5 years I have not been home because I am living in exile in this country. I did not come to America because I wanted an American environment. Because of our work in Manipur, we were threatened and I had to come out for a while. I miss my parents, therefore, and I would like to dedicate today's lecture to them as well as to friends and family who are here. Sam, Nasreen, Aiden, all of you who have been my family here. I'm also really would like to dedicate to the brave people of Manipur, the Tiprasas from Tripura and northeast of India, Myanmar, Ukraine, Yemen, and all the conflict zones around the world who are courageously fighting to survive wars and conflict. I'm also thankful to all scholar at risk, Professor Jacqueline, who's not here, as well as Jane Unruh, and Anne-Marie, and as well as Susan once again, and Michael at Widener for the support that they've given for my work. What I will do today in this particular lecture is I will share the inspiration that led me to document why we are documenting indigenous nations. It's a story which didn't come because I wanted to just document. It came, the inspiration, and I will share that inspiration. Concepts of what is a nation in today's world when there is rising nationalism which has become violent and authoritarian. What is it that we are looking at? And what is it from indigenous nations, what can we learn to inform modern nation states? What should our future look like? Definitely not a future of violence, but more of a future which makes sense to our lives and our world. I will also introduce you to a little bit of what's Manipur and northeast of India and what's happening there because the stories from there doesn't reach. And I will end with work that was done at Harvard on documenting this and what other ways forward so that you can walk out of this room with a little bit of hope because that's what we live for, right? Okay. I have some questions, and the questions are like this. What happens when the history of 45 million people and nations are excluded from the narrative of today's modern nation states? How do the excluded peoples and nations feel about the absence of our stories in this regional, national, and global narratives? You walk in museums, you go to libraries, bookshops, you see films, writings, events, stories. Our stories are absent. Imagine how those communities would feel like. And I'm writing this exactly as I felt all my life. How do we then document it? How do we document the languages, the culture that have been made to disappear through the coloniality of power? It's deliberate. And then how do we then engage to turn this? It all starts with our grandparents' stories. My inspiration to really start this documentary is to please meet Yensemam Gulamjad. My grandfather, maternal, was a medicine man. He was a healer, and he was a social reformer. He was born 1892, died in 1984, And this was just 1 year after the British annexed Manipur. The last kingdom in India to be annexed to British Empire was the Manipur Kingdom in 1891. He taught himself English and Bengali and wrote several notebooks. And what also happening was he also realized the exploitation of indigenous people happening with the coming of Hindu faith in Manipur. You know, my name, Binalakshmi, is the name of two goddesses. So it's how come a culture like us have a Hindu name, you know? It's because there was proselytization going on, and he realized how indigenous people were exploited through religion. And because of this, he was ostracized from his locality and actually banned from entering for 10 years. So I'm not the first one in my family to be exiled. He was the first, and I continue the tradition. And another part of my legacy is my great-great-grandfather, again, another who was a part of the legendary Manipur levy, and he was born in 1804 and died in 1867. He became a major, this is the highest military leadership in the Manipur kingdom. So he was the head of, basically, commander of the Manipur Armed Forces. And so these are pictures. We still today have his memorial, and our entire locality where we stay is named after him. So from not the later great-great-grandfather, but from my grandfather, I realized he told us about Puya. What is Puya? It is Manipur's indigenous historical text, and they look like this. It's a repository of our traditional knowledge and worldview, and it is not just about mumbo-jumbos. It is about science, technology, martial tradition, traditional knowledge system, politics, and economy. All of it was. 4,000 Puyas existed. They were written in the script Meitei Mayek, and they are made of paper from bamboo pulp, jute fiber, cotton, and silk, as you can see. So what happened to these texts? In 1729, when Hindu faith came to Manipur, the people who proselytized brainwashed the king and said the indigenous texts have to be burned. So in 1729, we have a phenomena called Puya Maithaba. And this I didn't learn from any history. My grandfather taught me this. And what happened? They were burned in the process to proselytize the indigenous people of Manipur to make them follow the Hindu faith under Sanjita's Kotsai. And then after the British came, so we have two levels of colonization. The first colonization was through the Hindu faith. And then it was followed by the British rule. So then it became, the Sanjita's Kotsai is from Bengali origin. So Bengali script was introduced to Manipur, suppressing the indigenous script. So what is the impact of burning of our historical and cultural texts? Oja Rambam Lokendra is one of the most erudite Manipuris that I've ever met in my life. He's still alive, and this is what he said. The indigenous civilization the Manipuris developed throughout its history had a cataclysmic rupture in the early 18th century, when the emerging world religion of Hinduism was enforced into the willing Meitei population through the use of state power and violence. So what I was trying to say was, again, these stories was the burning of the Puya is still now today through dance dramas, through theater, through radio programs. Every year, the narration goes on. So imagine an entire 4,000 texts were burned, but some of them were quietly hidden. That's why they were hidden by different families. And our family was one of them who hid some. So we are able to get back some of this. And today, Manipuri script is learned by the younger generation today. So it's not dead, it's revived in full swing, taught till master's class till today. So, which brings us to an attempt. How does any nation survive the onslaught of attempts at erasure of these? Nation, what is a nation? Why do I use the word nation? Nation is a large body of people united by common descent, history, culture, or language. Right? This is an image of Manipuri women on a boat protest. Have you ever seen a protest on a boat? Yeah, so this is a Loktak Lake. If you come to Manipur, I'll take you there. It's one of the largest freshwater lakes, and women are protesting. Why they're protesting? Asking the boundary of Manipur not to be altered by the government of India. So just to let you know. So when people say about a nation, it's about when you feel a sense of solidarity tied to a culture, a history, then it's a nation, you know. Benedict Anderson says, nations are imagined. We all in this room can also create a nation, you know. So it's always in the process of making and unmaking. And all I'm saying is in the process of doing that, how important it is to coexist, you see. That's what I'm saying. You know, when I came to United States, so many indigenous cultures told about their nations. And I was so happy to hear that. Their flags and how they write. I mean, my brother called me up and says, sister, are indigenous people still there in America? And I'm like, they are there, they are thriving. And you know, it was such a joy just to let them, they are there. And America has done a good thing to preserve. When I went to Washington, D.C., there was a beautiful exhibition called From Nation to Nation at the Smithsonian. And it was really, really, because back home, we don't have any of those exhibitions. Right now. This is the Manipur flag, one of the versions, and the gate of where the king is coronated. Now, I will now bring it back, Manipur, to a little bit of a world thing about relating it to global indigeneity. So, indigenous people are there in over 90 countries and territories in today's world. And 2/3 of them are in Asia. So I was trying to tell Asia Center here, you have to do more work, you know, because they're only stuck in like Burma or Tibet. They're not able to enlarge. So I'm like, please, there's so much they are missing there, you know. I invited James, actually, by the way, and I don't see him here, but he will hear this recording. Okay. So there are, and so many of these cultures, not just Manipur, but I have been to the Indo-Burma border. This is the region between China, India, and the current Myanmar. There are 100 million people out there whose history has not been recorded in the history of either Yangon or New Delhi or Beijing. Now, this 100 million people, this is what really felt, okay, Manipur was just one tiny portion. But when I traveled and started unraveling many more things, I discovered the world has missed so many of these cultures. Just to bring back to Harvard, last year we had an Indigenous women's convening where women leaders from 7 socio-economic cultural zones of the socio-cultural zones of the world came together. So these are pictures from there, including some of Harvard professors also in this. And you can see Mama Bear from the Haudenosaunee community there, and we had people who are from Sami people, we had from Peru, we had from Mali and different parts of the world. And just a couple of months back, as Susan said, we also had this online convening where we looked at the health impact of these conflicts on indigenous cultures. So just sharing the work that we have done. Now, I would like to bring our attention now to the northeast of India and Manipur, just to introduce you a little bit of the terrain, the people, and what happened there. Okay. Are we ready for that? Okay. So now I'm bringing you back to my region. The region where I was born, where I grew, is called Imphal, which is just, I was born just 2.5 hours away from Myanmar. When I go to Myanmar, we don't need a visa for 24 hours. So you can go and come back in a horse carriage. And it's very fluid. Again, McMahon Line, drawn by the British. A lot of them were indigenous territories, but given to Myanmar. So it's a cross-border indigenous communities living there. This is a very geostrategic area. It is home to 245 million people, 272 indigenous groups. It's a national geographer's paradise, if you would believe it. Now, what is interesting is this parts of India, of this India borders 5 countries: China, In fact, Arunachal Pradesh in my region, China has said it's southern Tibet and is refusing to identify it as a part of India. So there is border conflict in this. And many of these areas like Manipur, Tripura, Sikkim, there were 4 kingdoms in this, indigenous kingdoms in this part of India. And they were merged with India. For example, Manipur was never a part of India. It became a part of India in 1949 under duress. That means our king was imprisoned and made to sign the merger agreement, which under constitutional law is null and void. So that's why there is a conflict going on there. And since 1958, if you think India is a largest democracy, you will rethink, because we have a martial law in my region since 1958. So I grew up under a martial law. Under this martial law, anyone can be picked up, arrested, killed on mere charges of suspicion. And we cannot go to the courts of law because the Defense, Ministry of Defense, the Home Ministry, and the Ministry of Defense have to agree for any action against any soldier who commits acts of crime. Just to make it easier, if you enjoy Darjeeling tea, champagne of all tea, it's from my region. And the first oil of India was not dug in Mumbai, it was dug in my region. It's an extremely resource-rich area. And for me, my assessment, if India is having the martial law so that it could take all our resource. And we are saying, okay, take our resource, but give some back to the people. Let them develop too, you know. So it's, again, still negotiation. Just to let you enjoy the beauty of this region, I have been to each of these regions. These are in all bordering countries, you see, really lush green. Meghalaya and Tripura here bordering Bangladesh. And as I was mentioned, these are the, just to give you an aspect of as I told you, the 4 kingdoms, indigenous kingdoms which existed there. And by the way, Sikkim became a part of India only in 1975. And Sikkim had an American queen, Queen Hope, there she is. In fact, her papers are in Radcliffe, which I'm yet to access. So this is Queen Hope, she's still alive. So we have a lot of history there. That's a Manipuri king wearing his funny hat. Apologies if Manipuris watch this, but it's all times. But this is the mythical dragon which guards the indigenous kingdom. And of course, there are home kings back home. So just to give you a sense of what was like 100 years ago, 200 years ago. I just want to bring these images to let you know that if you meet these people here in the United States, do you think that they are Indians? These are people from my region. These are people from my region. And the kind of so as a result, what is happening is, because we look like this, the way we are created, when I first came to Delhi, I was asked, Madam, which country are you from? And my answer is in Hindi, maybe Indian, I'm Indian too. And they are shocked. All the time I'm asked. So imagine you being an American asking, are you American? Every time you have to prove that you are from this country. It's pretty painful. So there is a racialization. So when I dug deeper into what's happening, there is, knowledge has been racialized. And not only that, we have also. So as a result, what has happened is this beautiful part of India that I have been describing is tragically home to South Asia's longest running armed conflict. And there is heavy militarization. There are 300,000 Indian troops there. And as I mentioned, Armed Forces Special Power Act, military are operating. The round thing is they're checking for landmines. So this is how I grew up. For every 20 Manipuris, there's one Indian military. The military. That's why my work, when I started my work, it didn't start with indigeneity. It started with disarmament, because there's so much of guns, so much of violence, that my mind was asking, how do we end this violence? There are 350 military stations in the indigenous parts of the world. By the way, globally, one of the world's currently conflicts are in biodiversity hotspots. The world's most conflicts nowadays are in biodiversity hotspots. And who are in this biodiversity hotspots? 80% are indigenous people. So current wars in today's time is linked with environment, it is linked with indigeneity. That's why it's so important not to toss indigeneity as a mumbo jumbo, but see what is happening there and how can we do to make it different. So just demonstrating how in Manipur, where I come from, if this is the level of militarization, which New York Times will never report, or BBC will hardly report, but it's happening right there every single day. Our archaeological sites are militarized. These are, and so many of our museums are militarized. Military is staying in our schools. They have made our cinema halls. I have never been to a cinema hall in Manipur ever since I grew up, because military is occupying those spaces. So all our archaeological sites, our historic sites have been militarized there. And as I mentioned, these are Manipuri women wearing funeral attire. Our funeral attire is not black. It's white, and we wear white when someone passes away. So these are Manipuri women asking for the removal of the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. You heard about the Rohingya crisis. We heard about 10 million which has been coming out of Ukraine. But more than 300,000 internally displaced people have all been, and I have visited the people that are in this particular photos, many like this in my region. India has not signed the Refugee Convention. India has not recognized internally. So they are in different camps, hundreds and thousands of them. I was once told by a man, please take these 4 children, because their parents were killed in this conflict. And I don't know if one day when I have a big house, I'll have many adopted children. It hasn't come yet. But there are so many of this conflict has resulted in so many families displaced, so many people who have lost their loved ones in this conflict. Another thing, why do you not hear about these issues? This part of India, if you come to India one day with an Indian visa, you are not easily allowed in these territories. You need a special permission called the Protected Area or Restricted Area Permit to enter this area. Basically, that's why no humanitarian aid agency, no UN agency is able to come to Manipur. As a result, even if there's a huge humanitarian crisis, many people have been left bereft. And that's why in 2007, one of the reasons, because I love scholarship, I love research and writing, but I was forced to be what Indian media call me an activist. I don't even know what that term means, but what we did was, you just couldn't say I will be a scholar doing my scholarly work. We started the Manipur Women Gun Survivors Network just to help families who have survived violence, because violence doesn't affect those who create it. They are hiding behind bunkers or in other countries. Violence affects, I have seen, the poorest of the poor. And I couldn't just conduct my research and walk away from many of these families. These are women that we work with images. 50,000 people have been killed in this conflict. Thousands have disappeared. Many cases of extrajudicial executions, both by state and non-state also, because there are armed groups in my region too, because young men are getting angry, they have picked up arms too. So 20,000 women have been widowed, and a lot of young men between the age of 17 to 40 have been killed in this conflict. Every day, 3 to 4 people are shot every day in my home state. It's not like Rwanda, where millions killed in months. In Manipur, very smartly, it's called slow killing. I call the word slow killing. And because of the martial law, we cannot even go to courts. These are people who have been shot, and there was mass graves in this, but no media will report. Indian media doesn't write in New Delhi. They only write about Hindu-Muslim conflict in India. Every newspaper outlet only on Hindu-Muslim conflict. They do not write about the conflict and the violence happening to indigenous people in the world's largest democracy. As I mentioned, many communities from my region are given racialized terms, profiled as Chinkies, Momos, Chow Mein, tribals, and subject to racial discrimination. Before I came here, I led a protest. We had our George Floyd moment in 2014 when a 19-year-old boy, Nido Tanya, whose picture is here, was beaten to death in the streets of New Delhi. And we protested for 3 months nonstop in India's Jantar Mantar and got the government of India for the first time to recognize and create a committee called the Bezbora Committee Report. I met both the ministers, at the time Home Minister, and was a part of the committee which is called the Bezbora Committee to ensure justice for many indigenous communities there. There is also a continued attempt at population engineering. That means infusing. It's what China is doing to Tibet. It's like infusing population so that we become minorities, so that our political rights are then taken away in both banks. So these are people from Tripura who are also struggling right now to save their own future kind of thing. I have a master's in Indian history, and I did it for 5 years. The only thing I learned after 5 years is where is the history of 45 million indigenous people? It's absent. And I told my professors why it is like this. And they have no answers. So we started a campaign called Include Northeast India in National Curriculum. So this is, again, our own process of trying to document what's there. Now, if you ask where are the indigenous people in the Indian caste system, we are not in the caste system. We are outcast, out of the caste. So it's very interesting, like when you go to New Delhi, Mumbai, Kolkata, we are just, everyone is clubbed as just tribals. People with loose moral, people who had take drugs, anything negative connotation they will give to us. So it's very, very, very difficult all the time. And even while coming here also, like I have to struggle through this imagery just to again give a beautiful hope. When these things are happening, Manipur has also a really powerful indigenous women's movement. This is Ima Momon, who died about 3 months ago, but extraordinary women leaders who have never been to school in their life, but they knew how to resist, non-violent resistance against the martial law to safeguard the community people. So this comes to what I have done here at Harvard, documenting indigenous nations. So the quest, as I shared, was what inspired me to undertake this work during the period 2021 and still ongoing. And I wanted to know at Harvard, what are the documents in my region here, because Harvard says it has the world's largest library, right? So I started like last year searching where is anything of Manipur there. And then also to see, okay, if it's not there, then what can I do to inform Harvard that you are missing these books or materials? I went not just to libraries, but I also visited many exhibitions here, museums at Harvard to see. I worked at Tozer to assess the collection of books, articles, and journals. I visited Houghton Library and Widener while working mostly because pandemic was still on and no one was allowed, right, mostly. Now, just to juxtapose on Manipur, as I mentioned, bringing back to unraveling another aspect of why I search as to why some of these nations needs to be documented. Like Manipur, I'm just explaining what we are missing when we are not documenting this culture. So Manipur was an Asiatic nation state, as I said, annexed by India in 1949 after the British left. This is the landscape. This is the border of India and Myanmar, as I mentioned, just some images from there. And this is Shillong Times saying the annexation of Manipur by New Delhi as reported there. This is a painting of that time of the merger agreement signed. India developed its constitution in 1950. But Manipur had its own constitution in 1947, which has universal adult franchise, monarchy was abolished. So it became like a modern democracy. This was 3 years before India wrote. But this history is never taught to anyone in the country. So that's also some work that I'm doing to see how we can deepen this knowledge. And so what is it why the attempt to erase the notion and nation of Manipur? This was what has inspired me to do this documenting indigenous nations. As I mentioned, this is the script of Manipur. We have our own script. We are not just running around in jungles as tribals or savages. We had our own script, as I shared. And I'm bringing you some images of some of my favorite people I've worked with, belonging to different indigenous communities. H.A. Panti in the middle, Rose Mangsi. And we also have a lot of Muslim community in Manipur, Farida and Mumtaz. We have been working with them for the last 7 years. Manipur has one of the world's largest women's markets, where 5,000 women are selling things which are needed in life, and that's also the harbinger of women's solidarity in one area. This market is a 500-year-old market. New York Times recently reported on it. Again, Imanganbi, Rina Mutum, and Sujata in the photo there, all working every single day in this. I wanted to bring one little fact. Polo, which is played by the rich and the famous, did not originate in Great Britain. The birthplace of polo is located in 2 places, one in Mongolia and the other is in Manipur. And these are pictures of Manipuri polo players of 1891. The British saw Manipuri polo being played and took that to Great Britain and spread it to the world. Another delightful photo. It's not just men who play polo in Manipur. These are Manipuri women polo players. And till today, every year, except during the pandemic, international polo matches are held in Manipur every single year. So just to come back, so Manipur had, as I mentioned, I would say 3 waves of colonization. First, what I call religious colonization, as I explained, with the burning of the indigenous texts called Puyas. The second, when the British came. And the third wave of colonization was when India, as I said, Kodanogs, annexed Manipur in the year 1949. These are images, pictures of that period. As I mentioned, Manipur had also 2 historic women's war. These are not fought with guns, but it is non-violent women's movement where in 1904, when British soldiers tried to recruit Manipuri men for forced labor, the Manipuri women said, "Our men are not your slaves," so they blocked the British soldiers from coming. So this was known as the First Women's War of 1904. We had another women's war in 1939. Manipur is really famous for rice. It's the origin of rice belt of the world. And the British, together with the business class, Marwari siphoned Manipuri rice and creating artificial food scarcity. So the women came out from the market, that women's market, and physically boycotted the British political agent and stopped the export of rice, saying, "You don't export when our children are dying from hunger." So this is known in our history as Second Women's War, just to say how rich and layered these various layers of history are in these indigenous nations. The current state of Manipur is, as I mentioned, we have this, the martial law still is there, and now there is an attempt to divide it now between hills and valley, between those who follow indigenous faith and those who follow Hindu faith. And now the third form of coloniality of power that I'm seeing right now is with Hindutva. Right now there is a massive attempt, as it happened in 1729, I'm seeing a revival of that phenomena of trying to suppress indigenous faith in Manipur right now. And this is very, very, very tragic because knowing this history from more than 300 years ago, it's coming back right now. So the next struggle after Harvard that I'll be doing is to confront this, but we'll do it with love and not with anger. because it's not right. We have to show them that you cannot repeatedly commit these acts of violence on indigenous communities. So this is women that we work with, just again, we have been also not just documenting, but because how do you document a culture when there's little written about it? So we have been actually gathering, like this meeting, we have had so many convenings. These are images from what we call women peace congregations. And we get women from different indigenous communities as well as non-indigenous communities. People to come and work, Nepalis, Bengalis, Manipuris, Tripuris, we get them together, share a meal. You will not fight. You can talk any issues out. So we kept doing all of this. Julie, there you are. So this is to prove that I was really working. This is at Houghton Library. And in the fall of 2021, I worked at Tozer. So with all this thing, as I said, I was investigating. I have submitted a report. And some of the reports I have mentioned is I have suggested to Harvard because I actually found very little on Manipur, okay, or in the region. But I also, after looking at the libraries and the museums, I said, the dances, the weaving, the polo, there's so many things that Harvard can enrich its collection. Why not? So I have also suggested books for procuring. It's still a work in progress. These are digital maps from the region, which I have found in the Harvard archives. And Peter is here. Yes. We looked at, because the region that I spoke about, Manipur and the northeast of India, was also a place where a very critical World War II battle was fought. Because when the Japanese Axis powers were entering from Burma through Manipur, where I am from. And that's where the Allies' power, and most of it British and American soldiers, they were in Manipur and confronting, and the decisive battle was fought in Manipur as well as in the neighboring areas. So we have World War II cemeteries, and we have so many books written during that time. And Houghton Library has some of the dispatches from 1944, which we were able to look at. These are images from there. And these are what Peter shared with me, some of the really interesting report which was done in the Times Dispatch. You can access this at Houghton Library here. At Tozer, I will still be doing more work, but I found this book by this anthropologist, Naked Nagas. But it's there. His drafts are here. He has done a lot of documentation on the Naga community of the region. So besides this, I haven't found anything else. And I urge Harvard to do more. And I will be happy to work and also introduce to so many other scholars, not just in Manipur, but who can then you can work with from different communities to be able to. So I am bringing this slide. You may be saying, why is she bringing this slide suddenly? The reason why I'm bringing this slide is because in today's world of violence and conflict, what are indigenous nations, cultures, way of life telling us? Are we listening to those? There are 21 known conflicts in the world, but there are 378 conflicts which you would never read about. The Manipur conflict that I shared today is just one amongst 300. What we are seeing at the touch of our screens or on our smartphones, that's just, they are giving us not even half the knowledge of the world. And so currently with 600 million displaced, add 10 million now from Ukraine there, one person in the world is displaced every 2 seconds. And 85% of the refugees are in the developing world, and the world continues to spend $1.3 trillion in the armament industry. I've done a lot of work on disarmament. That's another discussion for another time. The Manipur Story. links colonization, multiple levels of colonization. It links also post-colonial nation states. For example, India was also a victim of colonization. But after India got independent in 1947, the martial law that India has imposed on the indigenous people was from the British colonial times, which was put in 1942 to thwart Mahatma Gandhi's Quit India movement. When government of India came independent, it took the British law and put it on us. So this is something, is there anything new that we can do, creative? We want nation states to be a little more creative than borrowing it from colonial past. Right? We are also linking how we have seen how militarization of indigenous lands have happened. We have also seen how martial law and the continued coloniality of power, which has been existing since time. So my talk has sought to find answers to has demonstrated through documenting the Manipur nations that there are forms of indigenous governance, wisdom, way of life that are different from post-colonial modern states. When we are searching for answers, when our children are going to ask, why is the uranium cooking? When we cannot respond why there was bombing in Brooklyn yesterday in the train, how can we answer these questions to our children in the coming generation? So we have to really have the courage to create another worldview. And these, if you look at some of these indigenous cultures, you can find some of these answers. For instance, when I was growing up in Manipur, when a good meal is cooked at home, my mother will not be at peace till she will pack a tiffin and take it to the neighbor. It is a concept of sharing. Anyone who's doing business in Manipur is not a good person because money is just another currency or another human-created idea, right? There are other ways that you have to find alternate ways of worldview. And I come from an indigenous area, and I'm here in America, and I'm seeing how we can learn the good things from one another. Today's world of what Gandhi said, enough for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed. Greed is what is happening to Ukraine. Greed and the whole power of nation states built on war is what is making us, taking away our peace. With this, I will end. These are some of the images that I've submitted to Harvard in terms of, this is the picture that you're seeing on the right. This is our wedding dress. It's also a dance costume of the Manipur classical dance. Really intricate. Just like you have nowadays smartphone and laptop, without that our lives doesn't exist. In Manipur, every house has a loom. It's like an amazing culture where everyone knows how to weave, probably except me. But so it's like there is a culture of working, continue. Again, this is an indigenous musical instrument from the state. As you mentioned, the polo, the funeral attire one once again, attempts at documenting, continuing. And I would just end with these words. In several years ago, I wrote this book called Mekle. Mekle is the old name of Manipur, but oops, it went off. I just wanted to share this last lines in terms of history and our present lives. Our present lives are history. They are deeply, deeply connected. And as history weaves our present lives get woven. So it's very important to know our past, to understand our present, to be able to have the courage to go ahead in the future. So with this, I would like to thank you for your attention. Yeah, don't worry.
Bina, thank you so much for such a powerful lecture, and also for essentially, I think, probably schooling a lot of us on the history and of the region as well. So if it's okay with you, we'd love it if you could answer maybe some questions, or even just listen to some comments from people in the audience. So if you'd like to speak, I can pass the microphone to you. Anyone?
And if you can introduce yourself, it would be
Thank
wonderful.
you so much. I learned a lot. I thought I was somewhat knowledgeable about many indigenous communities in the world, but I certainly didn't know your story. You showed us a book at the very end that you published, and that raised the question for me, is there any local media in the Manipur region today? Are there newspapers? Are there radio stations? Is there any local communication? You've been under martial law for so long, which I find really hard to believe. So.
Yes, thank you. Yes, there are newspapers and media there, but it's like being in a pond, just stuck there. So it's like being churning in a pond. So the news gets there, it's circulated there, but it doesn't get out from there. So that's why many people, my friends from the rest of India, when I told them about the Manipur story, they told me, you are telling it from a film. They couldn't believe it. I have met many professors here in this country too. They think I'm a secessionist for telling this story. I'm not. I'm just a scholar and a genuine human being trying to find how to make things right. So this is what we are struggling to penetrate in terms of like unravel what's happening there. It's like completely hidden. And so we are trying to see how, that's why we went to New Delhi, established an office. I have met so many prime ministers. I've met the different, went there to say, look, rectify it. We'll bring the scholars. Nothing happens. In fact, we were told the history of Manipur and Northeast is not history enough. Can you imagine? And I come here in this country, and I've been told the same thing, that indigenous history is mumbo jumbo. Absolutely. So it's unbelievable, today's world of narratives and history making.
Did you give a copy of your book to Tazra Library?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yes.
But you will.
Yes, I will. Yeah. Yes.
Any other questions from the audience?
I am one of the people that was educated by this, and came to your talk knowing just a little bit, and was quite moved by it. Any number of questions I could ask. One of when we at the libraries at Harvard, a place of enormous wealth and power in its own, we often struggle with issues of asymmetry between, like having, so much here, and then, and there is the long legacies of our libraries. We built these collections in some ways through colonialist, when we think internationally through colonialist lenses and actions. And one of the things I would really love to work on with you or get your thoughts on is like, how can we kind of transcend some of that perspective and work, because I think we agree that these are stories that should be documented, and they're stories that should be told and preserved over time somewhere, but like how can we sort of think together about that, recognizing some difficult history and probably ways in which this country may or may not have contributed to.
Yes, thank you so much for such an honest sharing. Really, really appreciate. The only prayer that we have as indigenous communities to the modern world is to listen to us and our stories, and to let us share. Because every classical theorist, every classical that I've read, they have just started the world of modern making by relegating indigenous people to savages. And that's not right? But what we are saying is past is past. We cannot rewrite what was written. We cannot undo what has happened in the last 500 years. But the next 500 years, we can help walk together. And that's why my whole work on indigeneity, disarmament, demilitarization, there's so much link, each one of them is. And one of the things that we can do is, I think, Harvard Library has taken the first step to have the courage to have me here, And we have here Sam, with whom we are working with the Global Alliance of Indigenous People, Gender, Justice, and Peace. This consists of really fine scholars from 7 sociocultural indigenous zones of the world. And we can bring so many of this really amazing scholarship and their work, their ideas, and share their wisdom and to be able to build more inclusive networks of knowledge building and world making. Because today's world is so much geared towards an exploitative world. That's why violence becomes a norm. But our indigenous world, yes, we also fight. We have issues with our men because of a lot of things. So we struggle there too. And there are also communities which are struggling with one another. But there are some of these, as I said, what can we learn from each another? So that's one. The other thing is, I have been really researching on indigenous constitutions and indigenous forms of democratic forms of governance, if it's there. Here, the Iroquois Confederacy had the Great Law of Peace. In fact, the word United Nations probably came from there, because they have amazing terms when I was reading, and I plan to spend some time living in the territory this summer to see what is it that we can learn from one another, because Manipur had our own written constitution in the 12th century. I only mentioned 1947, but we have the Loyumba Shinyen in the 12th century. The same year, the Iroquois Confederacy made the Great Law of Peace. So, and we have never known about each other. So these, and what does, it's not about the existence, but what can we learn from those indigenous way of world making and politics and foreign policy done there? For instance, Sweden developed what is called feminist foreign policy. I don't know if some of you read it. Of course, there are criticisms to it. It is just from Europe again. But what I do like about looking at foreign policy in a way which is feminist is that it doesn't talk about war and providing more guns and weapons when there is a struggle there. It talks about to have a world view which is much more egalitarian and not competing and not violent towards one another. Modern nation states are built on a lot of violence. America was a debtor nation. It became a creditor nation in the World War I. And yes, so these facts are there. But the thing that I would like to tell America is that this cannot and should not define the next 500 years. Just last couple of weeks, indigenous people went to the Rome to meet the Pope, I don't know if you have heard of it, and asked to rescind the doctrine of discovery and asked the Pope to apologize for the wrongs done, you see. So these things are emerging, So I think there is a way that we can walk together. And that's also our hope of documenting this, because a lot of our histories, our narratives are absent and then distorted. So as I mentioned, and we are facing this struggle every time, and it's very tiring, but we will continue the struggle. Yeah. It's too long to answer to your question. No. Sorry. Yes, sure. Yes.
This is a completely
Yes.
so I'm actually was fascinated by the Puyas.
Yes.
So Those were 4,000 texts, many of which were destroyed in early 18th century. And then, so how many did survive, and where do they? Are they still with the? Were they passed down to the families who preserved them, or what do we know about them? That's a library question.
Yes, absolutely. Because it was hidden, a lot of families wouldn't tell who have them. But I remember when I was growing up, my grandfather had a group of what they called maicho, means indigenous wise men, who came to our house, and they were reading them together. So we know which families have it, but we don't put it on record because, again, if they come to destroy that. But now it's digitized thanks to digital world. We are able to, sort of digitize them and keep it safe, So those things. But yes, some are there, and I would love it one day, to come here for those puyas to be, as a part of an exhibition or something. It's one of my dreams to also get a Manipuri polo team to come and play here. It's these are like cultural things and indigenous sports, which we have invented and for the world, and both living legacies as well as, so they are right there. And I haven't even spoken about my father's book. My father spent 13 years after retirement learning the indigenous script and translated Manipur's indigenous chronicle from archaic Manipuri to English. And so he has, our family has some of those collections, and he was able to do the translation. So again, we have to really check where they are, because attempts are still being made to destroy. Right now, the country is going through a whole process of Hinduization. And hope we have the courage to again stop another burning of the Puyas happening. So it is very tense time now, with a lot of power and politics concentrated in one political party. It's a democracy, we are not saying anything. Any party can come to power, but to not destroy cultures and beautiful cultures which would help enrich the nation as a whole, and nations together, and the world together. So there are so many things that needs to be documented, because we are so worried that they may be destroyed. So we know who are the people who are preserving those, but many things are not yet public yet because of the fear that it might be taken and destroyed, because we have a martial law. And to destroy a nation, you destroy its history, right? Its culture. I've shown you pictures of how our archaeological sites, we're all militarized, military barracks. Our museums, our areas of arts, we're all full of military. So that's the thing. But we would like to work with well-intentioned institutions and communities to be able to preserve that. That's something that I'm saying on behalf of my people. Today's lecture is for the people of Manipur, a very, very historic moment for us. And thank you to Harvard Library, and thank you to Houghton for hosting this. Never before in Harvard's history has been a public lecture on Manipur ever been invited to. This is our first ever. So we are very, very emotional about it. It's people back home are waiting to watch the recording of this today. And I'm really thankful once again, and continue to work with well-intentioned communities, people, to be able to help document many, many such indigenous nations. We have so much to learn from.
Well, I think the last...
Julie has
sorry,
has her hand. Yeah. Julie, please introduce yourself.
Sorry, that was a really good ending to this, but I'll ask one more question. Yes, hi, I'm Julie. I'm the librarian for American Indigenous Studies at Houghton Library. I work with Susan. And I guess I just had a question about, you mentioned a little bit about the protest on a youth who died in India.
Pardon me?
The teenager who died in India. You mentioned a protest in Manipur. Somebody who was killed in
Oh, yeah.
yeah. So I guess I was just wondering what is the Manipuri youth movement look like? Is there one? Are there ways that they are also you're also trying to convey your history and all these things that you've been going through to the community there?
Yes, absolutely. The youth movement is very, very strong there. We have a very strong student union leaders as well as indigenous youth leaders. But because our history has been so distorted, not only distorted, they're not even being taught. So it's an identity crisis going on there. The reason why I wrote Mekle with all my spelling mistakes or grammatical mistakes is not because I wanted to be a writer. I was recording what my grandfather taught, that oral history, little bit through my personal story too. Because there was nothing else to read for the younger generation. So what happens, for example, how do you feel proud as Americans? How do you feel proud as people of wherever you are from, of whatever community you are? You feel that joy in your heart when you know, okay, this was done, But if that is destroyed, you don't even know who you are. So a lot of people of youth in Manipur and northeast of India are going through that crisis. They don't know who we are. And every time attempts are made to destroy that. And that's why work like ours are seen as threats. That's why I have never wielded a gun in my life, never will. But why am I a threat? Just by doing this work. It's so sad, right? So, it's going to be a long process. For example, I was just sharing, everything is linked to New Delhi, but not with each other. Everything, the roads, the books that we read, the films, the music, it's all imposed. Recently, we were protesting just 2 weeks ago. Indian Home Minister wanted to say Hindi to be imposed on many of and we said, no, there are 400 languages and dialects in our region, and we know Hindi, we love Hindi songs, but you can't say Hindi should be the only language. Right? So, and 2022 to 2032 is UNESCO Global Decade of Indigenous Languages. And so the richness of that, So I think the world is becoming more and more like listening to this kind of voices. Right now, so that's why we have a lot of responsibilities back home. So much to do in every state, not just document, but to also communicate that, and also to be able to let people know that we should know who we are. To be able to stay strong with our roots, to be able to fly, to be able to spread the branches of life around. Right now, there's so much of disarray. And that's why I'm really worried for India, actually. Because the kind of polarization, so the polarization is Hindu-Muslim, then again against indigenous minority Christians. This is I'm really worried for India right now. India gave yoga to the world so that you could have peace, but there is no peace in India right now. It's the kind of state making there is done with a lot of divisions, and it's impacting indigenous cultures too, because they are now dividing us between Christians, Muslim, Hindus, all on religion. So there's a lot of disquiet right now back home, which is really worrying. But hope that we have the strength to carry on. It will be a long struggle. But thank you, Julie, for asking. Yes, a lot of youth are following the work. They are working together. We will continue to work with them. Yeah. And I would love to introduce you to some of them. Yeah? Okay. And most importantly, one of the things that I feel is also to go and visit one another. And you know, there's so much of cultures to be able to. Documentation is not just about in a library room, right? You are a live documenter of witness to what's happening. So there are different things that we can program for making that happen once the world becomes a little better. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so on that note, I'd like to say thank you so much to our speaker for this evening, and I hope you would all join me in a round of applause for thanking Bina.
Thank you. Thank you also.